Hi friends, Eric here again, and talking again about video games, what I've been making and doing, and all of these cool things. Wow! Incredible! Still doing these. Anyway, let's start this week as we always do with talking about Virtuous Heaven, a game I released a bit more than a month ago, even though it feels more like several years at this point. It's strange, really strange. Anyway, you may have noticed that the Steam Summer Sale has started and Virtuous Heaven is discounted. Only like 15%, but still a discount is a discount. So if you want to buy the game, you can do that. I mean, you could do it also at full price, but now you can buy it at like a lesser price, and that's cool. So please buy the game. And if you have bought the game, this is very important. Please write a positive review on Steam. I've noticed this week, this week and especially yesterday, as I was trying to get myself motivated enough to mention that the Steam Summer Sale has started, and trying to motivate myself to post about Virtuous Heaven again, that one thing that may cause me, that might be a cause for me to not really wanting to engage with it is because I'm just slightly frustrated by the whole post-release experience in a weird way, because right now it's sitting at 5 counted reviews. Maybe it's if you count the ones from people who got keys elsewhere, it's maybe 6 or 7. And I don't think that this is a languish at 5 reviews game. I really don't. And it is deeply, deeply frustrating. Because it's not like I can do anything about this, right? I have to rely on the kindness of other people to fix this. And at the same time, again, my main problem with this whole thing is, again, it relegates something I've spent 7 years of my life working on to Steam's trash pit. And that's no one's fault but Valve Software's fault. Is Valve still called Valve Software? I don't know. Maybe they never weren't called that. But still, I don't think my game deserves this. I don't think my work deserves this, but that's what I get. I mean, regardless of number of reviews, each sold copy is money that I will get eventually. So that's always appreciated, regardless of all of this other stuff. But I find this all just not very fulfilling on an emotional level, which I think might also be a reason why I'm just having trouble to stay emotionally attached to the whole game. Because it just feels like, oh well, that's over. And I find, again, there's this. At some point, I have to maybe spend some time thinking about this more. It is really strange how little I think about this game at this point, considering how much I've thought until May 20th about it. And how important it felt, all of it. And how really excited I felt when I finally released it. And then just gone, all of it. And that's mostly a me part, but also maybe just shows how my weird relationship with that entire project in general, and how in a weird way maybe my brain just said, yeah, I've spent so many years thinking about this all the time. Now I'm just like done with it. I don't know. I assume it will change at some point or another, but either way, I still think that like what exists is something I'm very proud of, and is something that I do believe a lot of people who like these types of games will find enjoyment in. So if you're like a fan of action games and a fan of like desperate, expressive stories about what the hell are you gonna do on the last day of the world when things are kind of fucked up, is something that you might want to take a look at. And again, just like from like what's put in there, I don't think it's a 5 review game. I mean, most games on Steam that have 5 reviews are not 5 review games, like in terms of like, and again, this is how Steam does it. In terms of like how then the entire platform will treat it as just like basically non-existent, which I'm sorry, but no. Also, especially considering that my first game, Splinter Zone, at this point after its release had more reviews than Witcher 7 had. And frankly, Splinter Zone is a much worse game. Was back then, and especially these days. So yeah, please, if you can, do something about this. And if not, it's fine. I'll get over with it. It's okay. Again, I can't do anything really about this. I cannot force people. I don't want to force people to give more reviews. I can only ask for them, and also like for people to write reviews, they would first need to buy the game, which again is another struggle for like various reasons, and I can fully understand that people might not want to do that at this point. So it is what it is. But anyway, Steam Summer Sale, games 15% off, I think. Please buy some copies, because well, money would be cool to have. I don't know what the new German government will do with the welfare system. I do not check the news because they make me depressed. But I'm pretty sure it won't be good. So I would like to still find a way to get out of it. So anyway, yeah, games. Wow. Let's talk about something that's more exciting than begging for reviews on Steam. Let's talk about JRPG game, because that's obviously what everyone's here for. Well, the week started off really well in that I deleted the game's domino board. For those of you who don't know what domino is is what you see here, what I'm using to build these makeshift presentations of. It's like a piece of web software that you that's free to use, that lets you build boards with cards and text in it. It's very simple and very unobtrusive, because well, it was made by a person who has very sensible opinions about things, and I love it a lot. I'm so glad that I can use Domino for these kinds of things, for as places to collect ideas and to link ideas and thoughts together and just work myself through things, instead of using something like, for example, Miro, which is just awful, which has more options to do things, but is also just terrible. So Domino is cool. I highly recommend it to anyone who's looking for software that kind of works like Miro but isn't Miro, and that you don't need to and that you want to use for yourself, because Domino is you cannot use Domino for a collaborative project. It's entirely localized on your browser. But for that, it's cool. It's also, as I found out, very easy to delete a board. which happened because, well, I mean, you can see. Let me. I think, yeah. So this is how it looks. You can see my boards here. You can see this is the new RPG board, and you can just click here, and it's gone. There are no warnings that happen, which is a bit unfortunate. So that happened on Monday, and well, like I started this board. I think you can actually see it back in late December, early January. I did a video. I don't know if it's on this channel, on like the other games channel, like video games channel that I have, where I talked about like my first attempts at like building a JRPG system, and I think I showed parts of like the domino board that I started back then. So I kept using it, and basically it had all of my ideas and thoughts and like processes for the last 6 months. Like basically all of my very like the very not the set ideas, and I want to do this and I want to do this, but like again the parts of of a creative process where like you have questions and just want to collect thoughts on something and then want to kind of like arrange them and see what you like about them and what you don't like. This is where like this is what was on the board, as well as stuff like basic ideas for enemies, like a list of status effects that I created. That's all gone, which is again is unfortunate, but it's not like the game's gone or like all of my ideas are gone. I also have this thing here, which is like where I like put down ideas. So it's not like I only use the domino board for this stuff. It's still kind of a loss and like sort of like ruined my mood for like half a day, because it's like, oh, why have I done this? And then, well, I created a new board and started sketching, because what I wanted to do was start to actually build enemies. Like, okay, the enemy is called like that. It has like these stats and has these moves, and like then build something out, and then from there start to build encounters, because that's what I wanted to do. So I made a new board and did this, and that's like the rest of my week was like I created the enemies, then I created like actual encounters out of these enemies, so like groupings of like different enemies together, or like just one enemy but several of them, and then I created a fake dungeon that like what I was talking about last week, which again is just kind of like a corridor where you fight 30 encounters in a row. So, and then like I did this to test, okay, how long does it take to get through the fights? How are the resources developing? I can't really show it on the camera, but basically like each time I play through them, I tracked how long it took to get from start to finish, how often, like whether or not like characters died during that time, whether or not like there was a party wipe entirely, which happened twice only, thankfully, because, well, the game soft locks when the entire party is dead, because there's currently no way to handle this. Also general notes and how many resources, like the state of the inventory towards the end of it, because that was really turned out to be really funny in a lot of ways. And then like I did like 4 runs through it. Like the first 2 were like a bit wobbly, because I ran into bugs and weird crashes and other things. But after that, I really like it basically kept running, which was good. And in general, like the time went down from like almost 40 minutes, or like around 40 minutes, to like the last one I did this morning was like 28 minutes. So I got better at my own video game, which is always nice to know. But what you can also see there is that like being more like finding more effective approaches makes a huge difference. Of like, again, it was like the same amount of like stuff I went through, the same amount of encounters, and I saved around 10 minutes, which is interesting. really. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about like observations that I had, because it's really interesting. Again, I've never built a game like this. I've only really made action games before. Never really made something that is much more mathematical and systemic, at least in such a way. So it was really, it's something that, like, for me is, so usually when I did playtesting for an action, or like for my action games, I check these things. Do I like how like the controls are? Do I like how the character moves? How like the responsiveness of everything? Is it something that I want? How well do the sequences like move into one another? Are there like any parts that are like kind of like wonky to like navigate or whatever? But slightly with the exception of Witcher 7, they were all built in such a way that there wasn't really a lot of trying to understand how things change from like the beginning of the game towards the end. Like that was always kind of like vaguely the same, and it was just like making sure that the units that comprise the entire game were like working roughly in the way I wanted them to do. With this game, I spent like, if you also include the time I spent working on it in December, though most of what I did back then is not really like in terms of like the systemic stuff. Most of it, what I did back then, isn't really part of it anymore, but still there's a lot of work that I still carried over in terms of like how turns are being handled, how the battle screen looks, and how you navigate through menus and stuff like that. So it's not completely lost, but like if you take these two, it's like roughly 2 months, and most of that time was just built on setting up the systems, setting up the math in the background, setting up basically the entire machine that will then start rolling once you start the game. And the interesting part again about JRPGs very often is they're very like resource management dependent, about like, okay, how much does each fight you have to take in like a dungeon or like a sequence of fights, how many resources does it take out of like the player's pool, and how does this what kind of compromises does like the resource drain impose on the player, and how is this counteracted with like other things players can do, and like what kind of like further interactions grow out of like the like basically the systems and the moves and the spells and character stats and whatever else you've set up, and that's stuff that like at least I cannot really predict, because I'm not the kind of person who has like a lot of like, at least that's what I think of me, is like I'm not really good at just like putting numbers into something and then projecting from there, okay, this is how it will develop, this is what will happen. I set up these systems in a way where like in a way where I thought, okay, if I build it like this, I expect that it will play like this. But then again, there was always kind of in a similar way build around, like in a similar way build how I built action games, in that, I built these systems in that this is how I want one fight to feel. But it's a difference between having just one fight that works in a specific way and having 30 fights that work in a specific way. So that's like, there's a lot of stuff I still need to figure out, and I still need to understand for myself, okay, what do I want this to be? How do I want this to look like? Before I can even start thinking about, okay, what do other people think about that? Because there's still like a lot of stuff that I have to understand for myself in a weird way. But still, it was like really interesting to see how this stuff that I like built like actually worked when you like put some stress on it, and just like see, okay, how does this all work over 30 encounters. So again, like runs usually took between 30 and 40 minutes for 30 fights, which is where you can see, okay, like an encounter took around 1 minute to like one minute and a half usually. I probably once this all like pivots into like something playable for other people, like I will probably reduce the number of encounters to like between like 20 and 25. I think that's like at least like with the way how long fights take, and especially how long a fight might take if you are not careful. There's like a huge variance right now in that, like if you do not, like if you, there are certain fights in the encounter sequence that I built that are like that can go south very quickly if you're not careful, which happened a few times for me because again I myself had to learn how to be most effective in the systems that I built. Even though I knew all the characters, there's still, again, things that you have to understand when you like put several different enemies into like basically into like a combination of one another, and they are then confronted with how their specific movesets overlap and like interact with one another. So that was interesting. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about specifics. So I think I talked about it last week about item depth. Which was an idea I had that I found funny and it kind of like introduced. So item depth is the idea that so you enter a dungeon or you enter like an exploratory like space with basically set amount of you set your inventory before you go out into a dungeon. That's in general my idea. Like you imagine you're like dungeon crawler, whatever, you're in town, you buy whatever 20 potions and 10 antidotes or whatever you want, and you then go into the dungeon, and obviously you're not like, this is the resource that you have while you're in the dungeon, right? And when you are at 0 potions, that spot in the inventory gets cleared. And you just don't have any potions anymore, and you cannot really do anything with that inventory slot in general. The idea I have with item debt here is that, okay, you do basically a similar thing. You get stuff in your inventory in terms of items that you feel you might need for this dungeon. Again, say you have 20 potions and a bunch of other stuff in there. And then you start exploring. However, in this game, these slots, once you've declared them, they like, as long as you don't like go back into a town and like completely create a new inventory, these are gonna, like, the slot where you put the potion in will always be the potion slot, even if you don't have any potions in there anymore. And the potion slot can also go into negatives. And that's interesting because of 2 reasons. One is an enemy like that I built has a steal move, which removes something from your inventory and can keep removing things from your inventory, even though your inventory, you don't have any item, like you don't have any usable items in there anymore. That's the one thing. The other thing is that one character, and this is something I did not realize until I played it, one character has a move, and that's basically right now your only reliable source of party-wide healing, where they take an item from your inventory and improvise a potion. It's like, the move is called Improvised Potion, and it's a party-wide heal, and it uses, like, my intention was it uses 1 item from your inventory. In my first few runs, it used 4, because it used an item per character that was healed. Which is why I ended up like at the end of these runs with like an inventory depth in around like minus 100 items across like all the items that I put into my inventory, which was really funny. Just in general, like the idea of like you like getting out of a dungeon being horribly in depth, like in potion depth, and like you then needing to first like balance out your potion depth before you could even like re-buy potions again. What I find really interesting about this depth mechanic is that it gives you an option to push beyond your limits, right? If you like, again, if you go back to like usual dungeon crawler stuff, is you have like, in a way, the resources that you have at your exposal. Yeah, that was the word. The resources that you have at your disposal define how far you can go. With this inventory depth mechanic, you can kind of push on and again accrue depth on your resources, because sooner or later you need to replenish things, and this might cause you to have then less resources, and obviously then like you have to find ways to like, I don't want to like put people into debt. It's like simulating the experience of crushing debt, but with potions. That's like not really funny, but like this idea of like, okay, I can't just keep going, and I can't just keep basically using my inventory, even though I don't have in my inventory with specific moves. You cannot like, if you have 0 potions in your in your item list, you cannot use a potion. That's not how it works. But you can kind of like accrue abstract inventory depth. That's the whole deal with it. So there's like one idea I had today was to or like there are 2 things. One thing I wanted to do is that like if you do like a larger rest at a checkpoint, you get a chance to replenish your inventory stock based on like different resources that I have yet to name and like define. So there's a way for you to like kind of like balance out the debt at this point. Another idea I had was like, and I think I talked about it 2 weeks ago in a video about like the idea of like item points that you can spend to like get items instead of like having money. An idea I had today was at least for like this example project that still the plan to make something that is at some point available for people to play. That at least in that project, to build it in such a way that defeating enemies gives you resources that you can then spend on a checkpoint to replenish your items. So that like in a way that you can, instead of grinding XP, you can grind inventory points to a degree. So that was like an idea I had today to kind of like balance this out. But I really found this interaction with your backpack in that sense very interesting. The other part that was really interesting is that like actually the character that had this improvised potion spell wasn't your most effective healer, it was another character. Because of that, I will talk about this in a moment. So that was another interesting part there. It also like opened up for me some question about like, okay, do I want to give players a more reliable source of healing? But at the same time, I do like this interaction, and I do like this idea of like players having to make a decision, because again, having characters die might not be a bad idea sometimes, because like they get revived after a battle, they get some kind of like status effect applied to them that also could be beneficial. I managed to like be fairly effective in like one of my runs, because like one character got a status effect that actually made them more effective at helping other characters. So you could do that and just like not bother with healing unless it's very critical and you're about to like wipe, because like when your party wipes, the idea is that you get reset to your checkpoint, but unless you like at least like until then, like as long as you're able to like get through a fight with one character alive, your entire party will at least be alive after that. So there's like that point as well. So yeah, this was one of the first things that I like noticed, that this can lead to like this can lead to moments where people have to make interesting decisions, and a lot of like how these fights in JRPGs work for me, or like what I find interesting, is that over time they create these moments where you as a player have to make decisions about not only which enemies, like how are you like attacking like a an enemy formation, like in which sequence, like which enemies do you attack first, like what kind of approach are you using to attack them. But also then the further question is like, okay, how much do I want to heal this particular character right now? Because I don't know, I have only like 5 potions left, or like, do I want to like replenish my MP at this point? Do I even want to use magic? Like, again, in a different system where you have MP, this game doesn't have MP. It has a different way of like giving you access to special moves. So that's, and this inventory depth again is like something where you have to wonder, okay, how much is it worth it for me to basically like pawn off part of my future resources in order to get through a section of a dungeon? And it's like another interesting like point where you can like, on one hand, where you give players who maybe use more resources than like kind of like the game was built around, to still like give them a way to go forward, and at the same time also give other players a way to kind of just like keep pushing forward and kind of like risking it. I have no idea what, I'm just like realizing there has to be at some point some kind of consequence about just having a tremendous inventory depth, I think. Because what's like, what like you like what, why else like what would stop a player from just, well, having a million inventory depth, like never even like getting a potion or whatever. So I have to think about that. Like, I don't know, like one idea I had was like, what if there's like an enemy or like specific enemies that have like moves that deal damage based on like your inventory depth? That could be a fun way to deal with that. You know, the more inventory depth you have, the more likely it is that in an encounter like a debt collector enemy shows up or something, because it, well, you kind of, you like, your like negative inventory is destroying the dimensional balance of matter. I don't know. I'm just like thinking about it. I didn't really think about that part, but I'm pretty sure I have to find some kind of answer here. The other part that I'm just like, it just makes me think about this right now. But it's something I keep thinking about. The other part I find really interesting about this game as opposed to action games is that, and in general, and this is like a general thing I have with JRPGs. In a lot of JRPGs, I am so much more on board and okay with games just being mean and awful to me than I am when I'm playing an action game. I don't know why, but I am so much more like, I take dungeon encounters here as a good example. It is like dungeon encounters every now and then is very mean and deliberately mean to the player, but I'm perfectly on board with it, and I actually like it more because it is mean to me instead of just rolling over. And I personally think that really good JRPGs are able to be mean to you when they need to be mean, or like to at least like tell you, hey, don't get ahead of yourself in some way or another. And I find this, and this goes back to like action game design, where like I was, and it's weird of me to say, because like one of the big feedbacks I always gotten for my games, I think a bit less with Witcher 7 so far, is that they were always too hard. When I was so like built around like, I don't want these things to be like awfully frustrating to play, because I hate action games that like that don't let you do cool things because they're too afraid of like you trivializing it. And I'm also not a huge fan in platformers of like them just being cheap and killing the players. But I'm sort of a fan of like JRPGs doing that. And again, now going back to like the item debt thing. First of all, letting you go into that, and then thinking about, okay, what can I build to like punch the player in the face when they like have too much of it? So that's an interesting thing, right? It's just like an interesting observation for me, like to realize, hey, like I approached this in a different way, and this goes like for the fights as well, and the fights that I have, and like some of the encounters that I built that are awful. Where like to a degree I have to be careful like how I distribute like some of the enemy formations that I've built, or like if I even put them in what will be played by other people at all in any form, because some of them were basically there were like combinations of enemies that made it very hard to hit them, and they were like very good at like just destroying the entire party, unless you like had a very specific sequence of actions that kind of like broke the formation open. But that's again like something, and this is like what I mentioned here, like the fights in general work well, and there are some encounters where you can just like power through them with just like attacking, and I think this is important to have like kind of like have encounters that are just very okay. I have to like press the like first option in the menu like 4 times in a row, and I'm through, and it's done, and it's great. While at the same time you do have to have encounters where it might still be possible to get through them with that method, but you might be much quicker and use less resources overall if you think for a moment which approach might be better. Or like which, like, or for example, to think about what kind of like in which sequence you want to like attack and engage the enemies. For example, if you like you have a formation of like 4 enemies in total, 3 of them are, I don't know, generic physical attackers that you could kill in 1 round. And there's one unit, however, who you really don't want to like, who you'd rather not want to like take an action at all, but it's tricky to kill in 1 round, though it's possible. And where there's a big difference between just like killing the simple people at first and leaving the annoying enemy up, who while you're not dealing with it is gonna make everything worse, or like thinking for a second, wait a second, this enemy does like these types of things, or is can potentially cause like troubles, so I'm gonna deal with that one first. And again, makes a difference. And I'm glad to see that like in this stuff that I've built here, this does make a difference, and this in certain situations makes a huge difference. Like a difference between, oh, this fight was over in a minute, and wow, this took me 5 minutes to clear. And half of my party is now dead, or was dead. So that was interesting. Another thing that was interesting, and something I like learned over time, and that's interesting considering I've built this, the help move is incredibly powerful, which is exactly what I want. So like help is what in a lot of other JRPGs is called the defend or parry move. Like the thing at the end of the menu that you press when you like don't know what to do with a character. When you think, oh, they're kind of useless in this fight and I don't want them to throw a potion or whatever, yeah, well, you just defend. And I always find this boring. And the idea of like this help move is pretty much taken from a lot of tabletop RPGs who have something like this, where like one character can help another character, a player character, and increase that character's likelihood of success or their damage and whatever, and also opens up more space for characterization and character interaction to happen. And I wanted to have this in, like, this was like this help move. The idea of like having a JRPG battle system with a help move was like one of the big things and big motivations for me to like start this whole thing in the first place. So it's nice to see that like it actually does make a difference. And there's like a lot of stuff that you can play with this help action, and it can really make your life easier in a lot of ways, and it's cool to see that it works. It's also cool to see how again this, because you have like interactions between specific character pairs, or like I don't know, like almost the entire party towards one specific character. In this action, you are saying something about how these people interact with one another, and like what, right? This is like, again, this is space where characterization can happen without you even like writing a single word, just because like one character repeatedly helps another character be better at the thing that they are already good at, or like helps another character basically get over a threshold where they're then able to like contribute more effectively, and that's just interesting to see, especially considering that there are like specific characters that without that help move would be much less useful, but are like especially useful because they have that help move and because they have character stats that make them better at helping. So yeah, that's cool. Speaking of helping and all that stuff, the spreadsheet magic move that I've built is really funny. So again, weeks past talked about the move spreadsheet, the thing where like I have like a list where every move, attack, and spell and whatever else that anything in the game does is listed in, and that can be accessed via other means, or like that's the whole idea. And like I want to have a character that like plays a lot with this spreadsheet. It's kind of like my idea of like a blue mage type thing, but like a bit different. And they have one move that basically keeps track of like the last thing that hit them, and if you then choose that move in their turn, they will perform it, no matter what it was. And that's what I mean with like this character turned out to be the most effective healer because again, the improvised potion move that another character has is a party-wide heal. So it hit that other character who then had access to like the improvised potion move with like, and because their stat and like how like basically the damage is calculated works differently when it like when it uses the spreadsheet magic move, or like accesses like the improvised potion move via spreadsheet magic, it heals more. So that was kind of like interesting to notice. That was like the first thing I noticed. Then how they're able to like be like a fairly effective damage dealer if they're attacked with the right attack from an enemy. They also like remember that move even though when they're not, like when an enemy attack fails to overcome their defense, which is cool. But it's also funny because the move never like does not, like the name in the move list or like in the menu doesn't change. It's always called Memory of a Past Encounter. So you the player have to remember, what was it they last got hit with. And I want to keep it like that because it's a nice potential source of chaos. Imagine, like for example, what happens a few times was because I thought, if I help them before they do the spreadsheet magic, they could heal for more, or they could deal more damage. Completely forgetting that the help move is also a spreadsheet thing, which then led to them helping the enemy. Right now, this doesn't do anything, but it will do something at some point, because again, it is funny of them just accidentally helping an enemy deal more damage to their friends. And again, because there's space for characterization to happen. And like other things. Then there's like moments where like you think about, wait a second, do they still have the potion move, or did they get attacked? And then you like think, oh no, they have the potion move, and you like do the potion move, and turns out they had an attack remembered, and then they kill their party member. Stuff like that. And again, it is actually helpful because they get access to things they should not have access to, and can have more means to manipulate things. Plus, at least with this, is like the plan, should this all come to something larger, the plan for this character is to have later on more ways to specifically get access to very specific moves, to have more control over what happens. But I do like the idea of like this very basic form of this character's magic system to work very fuzzy. Another idea I had was like, and maybe this comes at some point, was that the longer you have a specific move basically remembered, the less likely it is that you actually get that move, or instead like get moves that are like adjacent to it in the spreadsheet. But that would require some work to do this. And I don't know if how much I want to do this, like have this more specific than the way the game tends to handle moves, which is like not very compatible with that. But yeah, but it was funny for me to see, wait a second, there's just like moments of like, and this goes back to like my idea of like me being kind of okay with the game, occasionally just like not being very nice to the players, or like unintentional comedy of like you accidentally killing a party member, or you accidentally helping an enemy, or applying a status effect to like an enemy when you actually wanted to attack them, or other things. So that's just something that I find interesting, and and it goes further in that another thing I realized was that like fairly often, so there are like specific moves. I have like, it's a bit hard to explain, but like one thing that's very important for me with the way this game in general works is that each like enemies and player characters have different types of defenses that correspond to like specific like modes of attacking them. It's a similar system to like something like Pokemon typing or elemental resistances or whatever. It's very similar in that idea, but like it's not like, oh, you're doing fire damage. It's like a bit more broader defined what it is, but like you have 4 or 5 different types of defense, and you can and the like trick is to find a way to get past like a specific defense value. So damage, like you either do like your character's full damage or you deal no damage at all. It's a bit similar again to like something in dungeon encounters. Your attacks always dealt like a guaranteed amount of damage, and they always tended, unless they were like very specific, tended to always hit. But like enemies and characters in dungeon encounters had 2 different types of defense, physical and magical defense. And only after you've reduced either of those or both to 0, you were able to then attack an enemy's or like the player's HP. This system here is like a bit different, that you do not have to like reduce a defense to 0. You just have to like overcome it. Basically, your combination of like stats and like some random factors have to be higher than like the thing you're attacking, or like you're applying an attack to. Things like a defense value. This also goes to like applies to things like healing. There is healing defense that usually is 0, but might not be 0. And if it's not 0, it might just be that a character or like a thing cannot be healed. Which again, I find interesting as like a space for ideas to like get hooked into and like be used for something. So this is like how this works in general. So a lot of what you do during these battles is you try to either like attack an enemy in such a way that you attack that enemy's weakest defense, or you try to like reduce that defense so far down that you can attack it with something that you have like more easy access to. There are also status effects that basically change your like attack element. So, for example, like a physical attack has physical attack element. You can change it to dealing metaphorical damage or whatever, or healing damage. You cannot change it, but like it would be possible. So there are like different ways to attacking this and changing this. You can either change like the enemy's defense, or you can change a player character's, or like vice versa, like attack element to like sort of like get around the thing that's blocking you from applying damage. And something I realized, so I created a few moves that were meant to, this way you can change an enemy's attack element so that you can kind of like force them to attack a defense that you can buff via other means, or like make yourself a bit like basically make the enemy's attacks and like what they attack a bit more predictable. However, what I then noticed was I could also like put that status effect on like a different character and make them circumvent that enemy's defense instead. So what's interesting here is that like, and this goes in both ways, is that like the purpose of a move is not set in stone. Like just because something is a status effect attack in like the way this game frames it, doesn't mean that it's only useful as an attack. Very often it might actually be more useful if you apply it to a character. There's like one very specific status effect that I will mention in a moment that I actually found out to be much more effective if you just like put it on like a player character instead of always putting it on an enemy. So that's again an interesting interaction that showed me something that was in this system that in a way was intended for me to be in this system, but I didn't really like. I didn't build these moves with that in mind. It's something I notice and find really interesting, and this also shows to me that this decision of mine to copy Final Fantasy in that sense that like you can target anyone with anything is incredible when it comes to like opening up the possibilities of what you can do. And in general, I think when like people I don't know, like I haven't really seen anyone ever really talk about this specific quirk of like the Final Fantasy battle system, at least like in the turn-based era of like giving you an option to like throw fireball at your party. Because most of the time it's not a good idea. But again, there are situations where you want to do that and where it's helpful. And because the game knows that you can do it, then builds structures around where like it's beneficial, or like where it could be beneficial if you have the right setup for it. And seeing that, hey, the stuff that I've built so far facilitates this is again interesting for me to see. And then again, like the way this is all handled really forces you in a way to look at what you have and how you like best apply it to like each situation, because again, there's like a huge, like if you're not really considerate with specific enemies that I've built there, if I was not considerate with that, there was like was a huge difference between how difficult they were and how long it took for me to get past them. And that was mostly down to both liberally applying the help move and changing like the attackers or like the defenders like stats in such a way that I can more easily attack their HP. So that was really interesting to see. And again, it's like incredibly early. I'm deeply concerned about how the hell I'm supposed to communicate this stuff to players, because I don't know quite yet, and I also don't like. I'm also not sure how much of it I want to have open, and how much of it I want to kind of like keep fuzzy. So that's like stuff that at some point I have to think about. I don't have to think about it right now because, the only person having to deal with it is me. So that's I don't need to explain myself to like explain things to myself that I've built usually. So I'm not thinking about it, but like sooner or later I have to wonder what the hell I'm supposed to do there. So like one thing, that's the last thing, that's something I noticed today. There's like one specific move that kind of like had some unintended things. So one character has a move called Debate Me. That character is like framed as, oh, he's an intellectual. He's like very into books and arguing and reading and thinking about the world, and isn't really good at like hurting things with fists. And well, they do, however, have this move called Debate Me, which again, I don't want to go into details, but there are like reasons why like it's built in such a way. Again, a lot of the stuff I'm building is like built around me, like just like having ideas and finding them really funny, and then like trying to figure out, okay, how can I make this as like in a game and interesting, not just as a one-off joke. So Debate Me inflicts a status effect called Infuriated. Infuriated is something where like when you're like afflicted by it, it drops all of your defenses to 0. So you're very easy to hit, but it also like vastly like increases your physical damage potential. The idea here is that like, okay, this character kind of like starts trying to like discuss something with like a monster or like with a player character, and it's just so annoying that they like whatever like is being talked to is just like angry and wants to hit something. The idea was for this to be a taunt, like, you know, like a taunt move, like when you in the classic MMO system where like the tank character has some kind of move that draws aggro to it. And I like the idea of like the intellectual that actually doesn't really care so much about like violence, so much that they don't believe in it and are thus fairly resistant to it, to be able to like draw the anger of like monsters onto him with that move. That was like the general idea of it. So Infuriated, like Debate Me causes infuriation and causes, like, if it's a monster, forces that monster to attack that specific character. What I forgot to do when I built it, when I scripted this move, was to put in a check that looks at, like, sees, like, put in something that checks, does this move actually get through, like, the target's defense? I forgot that, which is interesting in that sense, because I obviously build a joke enemy that has ridiculously high defense and tends to do nothing unless you really attack it, and then it just murders a character and runs away. However, you can reduce that monster's defense to 0 if you use Debate Me on it, because Debate Me does never checks like what the defense is. And again, a lesser game, or like, I say a lesser game, but like someone who is not me would probably look at this and say, okay, I should put a check in here because this is unbalanced. I, however, looked at this and thought, oh, this is funny. I will lean into this instead. So like that monster will if you don't manage to kill it in one round, it will murder the character that said Debate Me, and like it will murder it even worse than it would murder you anyway. It's a difference between, oh, it did 5,000 damage and now it did like 500 million damage. So that's just like me having fun. I'm also glad that I can talk about this stuff because no one's gonna watch these videos anyway. So here's a secret for whoever has managed to watch this for like over an hour. So yeah, Infuriating and all this stuff is kind of cool. What I also noticed is how effective Debate Me is to boost my own party's physical attackers like stats, because again, it increases the the hit chance and increases the damage output. So like imagine you're in imagine a group of like characters in a dungeon, and there's like you have like in the front the burly one who's like fighting everyone, and in the back you just have like some kind of like an annoying nerd who like keeps trying to involve them in discussions, but not really to really as a way to like get them to be more angry so that they can kill monsters better. And again, this is like something where characterization happens, right? Like if you keep using the hey, why aren't you talking to me move, like between two characters, this says something about their relationship in some way or another. Like even though again you do not like at this point there's no story in here as well. It's just the way that the systems that I've built facilitate very specific interactions between characters and like from the characters to the encounters they have to go through. And that's for me that's very interesting because this is like the stuff I want to explore, and this is why I've set the system and set these things up in such a way, because I want to explore like JRPG battles specifically as a way to tell stories like or talk about or like show moments of great dramatic tension, and also show that these moments can be anything, and that they don't always have to be about you beating up a dragon. They could as well be about you trying to get through a door. Both can be dramatically like tense moments. It's just about the framing, like how you set things up and how you kind of like abstract the interactions out. So that's that's interesting, and that's something I just really like seeing. And again, then opens up the potential that like should there at some point be a moment where you like then think about, okay, how do I embed all of this into a narrative, and how do I frame this stuff narratively, like what I've been just thinking about, like what does it say about like the group of people that you're playing, when like it's very often effective for them to kind of like apply things that hurt others onto each other. What does this say? Like how do you frame this in a way where it's not like, because that's not what I want, is oh, these people hate each other, because that's not like JRPGs are like usually a JRPG party is a group of friends, or like people that at some point will be friends or potentially will be friends or whatever. And like I don't want this to be like the toxic party that just like hurts each other because that's how they like more effectively get through things. It has to be addressed in some way, it has to be framed in some way, but I still kind of like this basic idea of this, and then have to figure out a way how to best approach this and navigate this. But that's it's something you have to do anyway. The last thing I want to mention, because well, wow, talking about an hour, cool. Last thing I want to mention is another thing I noticed, that sure, I mean, I spent roughly a month now building this stuff, and now I have a quote-unquote dungeon that takes 30 minutes to complete. However, I've built this thing that takes 30 minutes to complete within roughly a day and a half, if you count the building of the enemies. If you count the moves, it's okay, let's say 3 days. If I were to take an action game and just like ignore all the graphics, just think about building a space that you navigate and that you do stuff in, that takes 30 minutes to complete. That would take me over a month, probably. Maybe it's because this is the way how like I tend to build things, but it is astonishing how quickly you can build time with this stuff, as opposed to like how long it took me for action game stuff. Doesn't mean that like what exists now is particularly engaging on a long-term scale or interesting for people who are not me to play through. That's not it. But just to see how quickly you can build something where you can really where you can test longer term consequences of something and longer term developments of something was interesting for me to see in terms of like, wow, I guess this is also like how you could make things and like create things that take longer, or like how you can also like kind of like adjust for time, right? If I know, okay, it takes me around 40 minutes to get through here, so like let's do like 2/3 of the amount of encounters, so that people like that it's not exhausting for less obsessive players, or like people who are not very experienced or whatever, and play around with that. So it's just like for me interesting to see in just like in how you can in a way very finely adjust the amount of time it takes to get through a part of your game. Whereas again, for like with an action game, I never had any idea how long it took to get through anything. Like I very often like I remember with Virtua 7, like the very early versions, I like played a lot, built like huge areas, thought, okay, this is like probably like, I don't know, an hour, and I was done with them in 15 minutes. It was like, what the hell? Like, how much would I have to build to like for it to take me an hour to get through this? It was always for me incredibly confusing and not very exact. This is like very early on, and this is like someone who like it shows up in every indie game Steam forum. Like there was like someone showed out like, how long does it take to beat Virtua 7? Answer is like, I have no idea. Like, and this is like, for me, this wasn't like me being flippant. I mean, I was like a bit flippant because I find that particular user a bit frustrating to deal with because he showed up in all of my Steam forums. But in that moment, it wasn't me being flippant. It was just like, I have no idea. Like, I now have a little bit of a better idea how long it takes people to get through Virtua 7, but at that point, I had no clue because it took me an hour, or like a bit more than an hour to play it through, like at 100%. What I did know was that it very likely won't take other people an hour. They will probably take longer. How much longer? Who knows? But I knew you can get through it within an hour. Here, I know that the most effective way is, like, if I know, okay, an encounter takes between like 30 seconds and 2 minutes to get through. That gives you like a range you can kind of calculate ahead and then build the space around and then see, okay, how exhausting would this be to play, and then like adjust this around these metrics a bit more. Like if you say, okay, I want this dungeon to take 15 minutes to get through, and then you build it and you see, okay, this is like way too dense, like an encounter, like the encounter density is too high, so you have to like increase the space or like whatever. So that's, again, all of it is interesting for me to just like figure out at this moment. That's because, again, I have never done a game like this before. And just like seeing how in a lot of ways the tool you're using to build these are like very similar, obviously, because, well, you're still programming things. You still need to make sure that like the graphics are where they're supposed to be, and the numbers change how they are supposed to change and all that stuff. But the way you apply these things are so different. It's really interesting to see, and honestly, it's, for me right now, it's much more fun to work in. And maybe this is just like the novelty of it all. Maybe this will change once I have like 200 of these encounters and fights to do and like balance, and maybe then it's awful. Who knows? We'll see. Honestly, I hope I get to that point, because then I know that, like, well, this project went far enough that I had to think about it. But anyway, the next things I want to do, this is like always for me a bit of a hard thing, honestly, because like this is like, okay, what are the next steps to like get myself to a point where I like actually have to build the dungeon? In a way, right now I'm trying to like skirt around having to like actually build a dungeon. So my next points are, okay, what do I want to do with chests or things you can find while exploring? What do I want this to look like? What specific types of items do I want to have in this very early thing? How do I want to deal with XP or character progression? I have rough ideas, but that's just that. There's nothing real like tangible here. And sooner or later, I do have to ask myself, how do I want to do the graphics? What do I want this to look like? I have this awful idea that's also cool of, so the idea of like, imagine a JRPG, but it was made for the Amiga, because I'm the Amiga clown. I love the Amiga. I grew up with it. I still think games from there look amazing. But at the same time, I know my limits with pixel art, and 16-bit pixel art at the amount of resolution that the Amiga had is not really in the space of what I'm capable of doing in a reasonable amount of time. So I don't know. Like, I still like the idea, but I don't know if I can do it. And then, okay, do I want to still use the like this weirdly modified Game Boy Color palette for it? Still keep to the 4 colors? Do I want to do it like that, which is also fine. So that's something. I have to like make extra graphics for the enemies that I made, which is gonna be fun because some of them are a bit. There's an enemy called the Discourse Tree. Don't ask me how it looks. It's probably like kind of like a tree with faces, like face leaves, or like apples that are like faces that talk. It has a move called Aura of Civility, which makes physical attacks a pain to deal with because everyone doesn't like violence for a few turns. What fun. And this is just the start. This is I haven't even really talked about, like, I think I talked a little bit about narrative. This is trying to like marry this like weird system with like the idea I have for like the narrative framing, like narrative around what potential would be like even for this playable version. Wow. Gonna be a journey, like everything. It's gonna be a journey. Please buy Witcher 7 in the Steam summer sale. That would be cool. And write a positive review if you can, and if you enjoyed the game. That would be awesome. Until then, have a nice summer and weekend and all of that, and potentially probably see you next week, and we'll see how far I've gotten there. Will I have deleted another domino board? Probably not. Anyway, see you around. Goodbye.